you got any young kids out there that are listening to your show, I'll tell them this. People love winners. You can put up 30 on a bad team, but if you put up 20 on a good team that wins, everybody can get an opportunity. And that's what happened to us in Yakima. I said myself, Chucky Brown, Reggie Jordan, Anthony Goldwire, Dale Demps, all those guys went on to play in the NBA. I was named MVP. I went from being in Yakima, Washington, in the CBA to getting a call from Rudy Tomjanovich with the back-to-back world champion Houston Rockets saying we want to sign you. I said, excuse me? He's like, yeah, we want to sign you. And the next thing you know, I'm in practice with Hakeem Olajuwon and Clyde Drexler. I'm like, you got to be kidding me, man. I had to pinch myself. I'm a living example, man, that dreams come true. And if you're willing to put in the hard work, then anything is possible.
And you are in Australia right now.
You're talking NBA basketball. You're talking great teams. You're talking great individual players.
Takes it off, and there's number 23, and of course Johnny goes nuts.
So we're all getting goosebumps thinking about it now.
I just tried to go out there and play my game.
I have no idea what you're talking about, Adam. I don't like anybody. I'm not a people person.
Strand, you make the pass, yes. Christian, can you catch the ball? Yes.
All the stars were aligned and all the muscles fired at the right time, and I was able to get off the ground and throw one down.
I was saving that as a surprise for you.
And now, introducing your host for In All Airness, Adam Ryan.
Welcome to episode 110. Thanks for joining me. I'm pleased to welcome Washington Husky Hall of Famer, 1995 CBA MVP and champion, and 8-year NBA veteran, Eldridge Recasner. I had the pleasure of meeting Eldridge earlier this year in Chicago at the All-Star Breakfast on the Saturday of All-Star Weekend. In this conversation, we discuss his life in basketball and the unique road Eldridge took to not only make the NBA, but to play at the highest level for almost 10 years. Towards the end of the episode, I'll share another great podcast review. If you can spare a moment or two, please add your review via your listening app. It will be most appreciated. Show notes for this episode and access to a huge archive of past episodes are available at inallairness.com. This conversation was recorded in May. Now, onto the show. My guest today is a 3-time All-Pac-10 selection from the University of Washington. Though he was undrafted in 1990, his sheer determination ultimately earned him an opportunity to play at the highest level in 1995. He's an 8-year NBA veteran. Eldridge Recasner, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Adam.
Appreciate you coming on the show. I'm excited to talk with you. Now, from what I've read whilst researching for our chat today, your uncles introduced you to the sport of basketball when you were back in elementary school. What do you remember of those early years just learning the game?
I think that the thing that probably stands out to me the most is one of my mother's brothers named Leroy was a huge basketball fan. And he used to watch Dr. J all the time. And that's kind of how I fell in love with the game, watching the Philadelphia 76ers games with my uncle. And then they would go out to the local playground and play. Initially, they never let me play because I was too small. I wasn't very good. So I used to just stand on the side and watch. And they had a little side court that was half court that I used to shoot on while the older guys, the grown men, were playing on the full court. I didn't get a chance to get out there probably until I was in the 9th grade, about 14 to 15 years old. Then they started letting me play when there'd be one or two guys short I could get in. But, that was my introduction to basketball, man, through my mother's brothers.
Did you play other sports whilst you were growing up? What was your favorite, perhaps, aside from basketball?
Football was my favorite sport. Football was my first love. I thought I was going to be the next Lynn Swann. The Pittsburgh Steelers were my favorite team with Franco Harris, Terry Bradshaw, Lynn Swann. That was my team, man. But when I got to the 9th grade, I was about 5'9", 135 pounds. So I was like, football's not going to work. I wasn't big and strong enough.
Whilst I pride myself on research ahead of any conversation I do like to glance at Wikipedia from time to time. I'm curious to know if this fact is actually correct or not. Apparently, in your first organised game of basketball, you scored a hoop at the wrong basket. Is that actually true? And can you confirm the details behind that, please?
Yeah, that's true. We talked about playing on the playground with my uncles, and most of the time there were so many people on the park till you have to play half court. So I was just used to playing half court, and back in those days, you didn't really have to clear the ball past the three-point line like we do in half court pickup basketball now. So, on the playground, somebody missed, you get the ball, you put it back in, then it was your ball. We call it make them take them. So my first game in the 8th grade, man, in junior high school. Somebody shot the ball. I got the rebound. I put it back in. But the funniest part of the story is I made the basket in the wrong hoop, but my mom got up and started clapping. That's my baby. And I was really embarrassed after that.
Oh, that's a great one. I'm glad I asked you about that. Now, you attended high school at Alfred Lawless in New Orleans. If my facts are correct, in your senior season, you were teammates with none other than a young Robert Pack. Do you mind just talking for a moment about playing with Robert Pack? And we'll get to him a bit later on in our chat. And how good was that high school team? And how far did you advance in those years playing high school ball?
So, yeah, Robert Pack didn't grow up in my neighborhood from a little kid, but he transferred in the 10th grade from the West Bank, what we call it. They consider New Orleans the East Bank, and he came to my high school when I was a senior. He was a sophomore. He was 2 years behind me in school. We started that season 16-2, Adam. I'll never forget it. We were one of the best teams in the city. And then I sprained my ankle really bad, and we ended the season 18-8, so we didn't make the playoffs. Actually, my junior year was the best team that we had at Lawless, and that was the year before Robert Pack got there. You know, I was the only junior that started on the team. My junior year with 4 of the seniors. We were really, really good, man. We just couldn't be the team. The best team was in our district. It was a team called Booker T. Washington. And we just couldn't get past them, and they went on to win the state championship that year. But my senior year when Robert Pack was on the team, yeah, Robert was tough because Robert was a football player, man. So I just remember him being tenacious on defense. Obviously, I was a senior, so I was the main guy on offense. So his role was kind of to distribute the ball and play tough defense. But, yeah, Robert was a great player.
Yeah, your paths would cross briefly in 1995, and I'll get to that a bit later on in our conversation. You were, I believe, a red shirt at the University of Washington for the 1986 season, and then you played 4 seasons with the Huskies from 87 through 1990. I've read that you were the first 3-year team captain, which is outstanding. And if my timeline's correct, you arrived at Washington just 1 season after the great Detlef Schrempf left college. What led to you moving cross-country from Louisiana to play up in Washington State, Eldridge?
You know, Adam, I'll tell you that when I mention this name, all your listeners, even in Australia, know who he is. But I played for a guy named Andy Russo who had Carl Malone down at Louisiana Tech, a really small school in Louisiana. He was a hot young coach in America. And in 1985, the coach at Washington, stepped down. So Andy Russo took that job. He was recruiting me at Louisiana Tech. That's where I thought I was going to go. But Marv Harshman retired, and the University of Washington hired Andy Russo. And he asked me if I wanted to come to Seattle, and I remember telling him no. I don't know anything about Seattle, so I don't want to go out there. And my dad was like, "Wait a minute, that's the Pac-10. That's where UCLA and USC is. That's a great conference. You're going." And I said, "I am." He said, "Yeah." So that was the end of the story, man. We got Detlef Schrempf, the great German player, had just graduated, but we had another great German player named Chris Velk who played several years in the NBA and was the Pac-10's Player of the Year back then, and was a great player on the German national team for many years, but I never knew anything about the University of Washington. I think I saw one special with Chris Velk and Detlef Schrempf, and it was titled something called The German Connection or something like that, but that's about all that I knew, man. I didn't know anything about it. But I came out here on a recruiting trip in August 1985. It was 85 degrees. There was 75,000 people at Husky Stadium at a football game, and I was like, man, this could be pretty cool. Then I arrived to school in September, and it rained for 2 straight weeks, man. I'll never forget it. Here you are, 35 years later, and I'm still living in Seattle.
Oh, it's fantastic that it turned out so well for you. Now, as a freshman, your Huskies went 20-15, and it was the best single-season record of your tenure in Washington. You were named the Pac-10, which is now the Pac-12, all-freshman team. How did you find the adjustment from high school to playing college ball?
It was a big adjustment, Adam. I remember coming on my recruiting trip, and they let me play with the team, and we had 2 7-footers. One was Chris Velk, another was a guy named Flosey. And I remember driving to the basket, and Chris Velk blocked my shot. He didn't even jump. And I said, man, this is going to be tough. I better learn how to shoot. So I really had to work on my perimeter shot, because in high school at 6'3", I was pretty athletic. I could get by most guys, and I could jump over people in high school because, at the high school level in the States, you might have 1 or 2 guys taller than 6'7". That's about it. Everybody else is usually 6'3" and under. So I got here, and I realized I had to work on my game. And I'll tell you, Adam, one of the blessings was having that year to redshirt, where I had a chance to sit out, adjust to college life socially as well as athletically. And by the time I hit the ground as a redshirt freshman, I was ready to roll.
Now, you mentioned Chris Velp there a couple of times. It was his senior season when you were a freshman, and I had a quick look at his stats yesterday. He averaged almost 21 points a game and 10 rebounds a game. To this day, he's still the all-time career leader in points at the University of Washington. Sadly, passed away all too young at just 51 in 2015. Just briefly, how important, and it obviously sounds like he was important, how important was he in terms of impacting you personally and then just on your team in general for that 1 year that you played together?
Well, we actually played together 2 years because my first year I redshirted, I still had a chance to practice against him every day.
Yeah, sure.
Game-wise, it was only one season. But Chris was a great guy, man, a 7-footer, highly skilled. Today's game would be perfect for him because he could shoot the jump shot, he could put it on the floor, he could pass it. He was just really, really skilled, man. A lot different from Detlef. Detlef was more of a hard-working, grinding kind of guy, but Chris was really gifted and really skilled. It was a pleasure to play with him. Like you said, to this day, he's still the University of Washington's all-time leading scorer. His junior year, he was Pac-10 Player of the Year. He should have been Pac-10 Player of the Year senior year. We just didn't have a good of enough season. So a guy from Oregon State named Jose Ortiz won it. But I would really like to see Chris Velp number retired at the University of Washington because, 40 years later, he's still the school's all-time leading scorer, man. And I mean, that's just amazing. And it's just pretty shocking that when you walk into Heck Evanson Pavilion, which is known as Alaska Airlines Arena now, you don't see the number 40 hanging from the Raptors because I think it deserves to be up there.
Yeah, absolutely it does. Now, your Huskies advanced to the quarterfinals of the 1987 National Invitation Tournament before losing out to Nebraska. That was your one taste of postseason play in college. How much do you recall of that tournament and what was the atmosphere like as you progressed to that third round?
Well, it was great. I remember we played Nebraska and they were undersized, but they had some really, really tough guys, man. I also remember, I think the first round that year we played Boise State, which some of your listeners might remember a guy named Chris Childs who played for the New York Knicks. Chris Childs was on that Boise State team. I just thought we underachieved. We had Chris Velp, one of the greatest players in the country. We had another big 6'9" guy named Phil Zevenberger. That was tough. But, we had a new coach for those guys. It was my coach that I came in with. But for Chris Velp and some of the veteran guys, he was a new guy, and they just weren't big fans of him, man. So I think a lot of the guys laid down. Adam, I'll be honest with you. We took a team vote on whether or not we were going to play in the NIT tournament, and the team voted against it, which was crazy. They said, no, we don't want to play, but they just didn't like the coach that much. But the school made us go, and the school made us play. But I don't think everybody's heart was in it. I just wanted to play, man. I didn't care what the tournament was. As long as I had a chance to play another game, I was excited about that. But a lot of the upperclassmen, they wasn't too thrilled about going and playing in NIT because you got to think about it. At that time, Washington had been a season in, season out NCAA tournament team.
I didn't actually know that the majority of the team had voted against that. I read that there was some exams that happened maybe a few days before, and that might have been a reason for not enough rest ahead of those games that were coming up. But, yeah, that's quite astounding that most of them said they didn't want to play.
Yeah, I was just as shocked as you are right now.
Yeah, that's strange. Just before we get to your sophomore campaign, in July of 87, you won bronze at the Olympic Festival in North Carolina, and it was your West team defeated the East 91-86. You had 9 points from what I've read. What do you remember about that event? And it featured a whole host of names which most of our listeners would know in years to come that would be NBA players.
You guys can't see it from here, but I've got a picture on the wall over there of my coach. We're at the U.S. Olympic Festival. It took place at the Dean Smith Center at the University of North Carolina. This was 1986. That was the first year that they opened the Dean Smith Center. And I just remember guys like Ramil Robinson, Sean Higgins. Like you said, they had some big-time, big-name players, man. It was a great experience because that was really my first time being on the national stage against some of the top college players from around the country. So, we won the bronze medal, But Adam, it's funny as I think about it. Even back then, guys was thinking more about draft status in the NBA than winning. We had a guy named Sean Higgins who played at the University of Michigan. I'll never forget. He called a team meeting before our first game. He said, "Do you guys want to go out, play well, and win the tournament, or do you want to impress the scouts?" And I just was like, "Whoa, you got to be kidding me, man!" But I wasn't at that level to come out of college after my freshman year. But Sean Higgins was a 6'8" guard from Los Angeles, California. Like I said, man, I just remember Terry Mills was at the U.S. Olympic Festival as well. just some guys that went on to have great careers in college, and a lot of the guys that went on to have really good careers in the NBA.
Yeah, a couple of the names that you haven't mentioned. You got the late Sean Rooks. Dennis Scott was also there. Felton Spencer, Richard Dumas, Willie Burton, Tyrone Hill, J.R. Reid. There's some big names there that ended up having some really good NBA careers as well, and some great outstanding college players, of course, in that mix too. Just in terms of your sophomore season at Washington, you went 10-19, but you led the team in scoring at 17 points a game, and at one stage you were honoured as the Pac-10 Player of the Week. I think it was in late January of '88, so that was outstanding. But prior to your junior year, you took part in the US select team that went to the William Jones Cup in Taiwan in 1988. Your teammates included Greg Anthony, Richard Dumas, Sean Kemp, Billy Owens, and Felton Spencer, to name just some. And you ultimately won the gold medal. You defeated some country named Australia, I think it was, 77-69 in the final. So all that said, was that your first overseas trip? And what stands out to you most from that tournament?
Yeah, that was my first overseas trip. I'll rewind a little bit. You talked about my sophomore season. I thought that was my best year in college. I just felt like I played great, man. I remember that year having 29 against the University of Arizona and Sean Elliott and Steve Kerr when they were number one in the country. Fast forward to my sophomore year in that R.W. Jones Cup, I think the thing that stands out most in my mind was Sean Kemp was an amazing athlete, man. He was coming out of high school, so nobody on the national scene knew who he was. But he was a 6'9", just like Greek god by the body, man, jumping out the gym. And I remember the people in Taiwan just absolutely fell in love with him. And the second thing that stands out, I think, the most in my mind is there was an earthquake in the hotel that we were staying in when we had breakfast one morning. You're looking around and chandeliers are shaking. And I was like, man. But I got to be honest with you, Adam. I've been all around the world. I've never seen as many people on the street as I did in Taipei, Taiwan in my entire life, man. I mean, if you got up at 3 o'clock in the morning, you couldn't tell if it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It was just people everywhere. If they had 4 lanes on the street, they turned them into 8 lanes. Folks that was on bicycles weren't by themselves. They would have like 4 or 5 people on one bike. It was just absolutely amazing. I've never seen anything as chaotic as Taipei, Taiwan before in my life. But what a great tournament, man. Like you said, we had some great players. Billy Owens, Sean Kemp, Greg Anthony, the great legendary Clarence Big House Gaines that coached Earl the Pearl Monroe at Winston-Salem State. So that was my first time going anywhere internationally, and I had a blast, man. It was really a fun time.
Pleased to hear that. Just reflecting back to that sophomore season where you mentioned that game against Arizona, was that at McHale Center?
No, it was here. It was in Seattle. Yeah, it was here.
How did it feel to have such a great game, scoring almost 30 points against those future NBAers? And Arizona were a stacked team back in that era too.
Yeah, they wouldn't have let me do that at McHale Center, man. It was just too tough to play down there. I think I went 11 for 17 from the field or something like that. I just remember having a great game. And I'll tell you something else about Taiwan that was amazing, man. I'm a kid from New Orleans, Louisiana. I love Chinese food. So I'm thinking Taipei, Taiwan, it's close to China over there. I'll order some Chinese food. So we go to this Chinese restaurant, and I'm asking for shrimp fried rice and sweet and sour chicken. And they're looking at me like I'm crazy. They're like, hey, that's American dishes. We don't make that stuff over here. I thought that was pretty funny because I thought shrimp fried rice and sweet and sour chicken was as Chinese as you get. But come to find out, that was an American dish.
As a junior with the Huskies, you went 12-16, and you had a career-high 32 points in late January of 1989, 20 of which came in the second half, and I think you shot 9 of 11 from the field in that time in a victory against Pacific. You also led the team in scoring again that season and steals, over 18 points and almost 4 steals a game. Do you recall that 32-point outing in particular?
Of course I do, because a friend of mine was on that team that if you got some listeners that are NBA fans, his name is Dell Demps, the former general manager of the New Orleans Pelicans and the New Orleans Hornets. So Dell was on that team. So even to this day, I tease him and I pull out that article. I say, man, shut up, Dell. I gave y'all 32 back in the day. But yeah, that was my career high. I remember having some nice plays. I had a nice tip dunk in that game. And I've got a scrapbook that every now and then I flip through just to reminisce about the old days, man. And you can see behind me, I've got a wall with all of my pictures from my NBA, college, and CBA days. So just great memories.
In terms of your senior season, you went 11-17. You again led the team in scoring at more than 16 points a game. also led the team in steals. Ahead of that season, I believe Andy Russo was replaced as head coach by Lynn Nance. And from what I've read, your relationship with Lynn differed significantly to that of your former coach. What's your opinion of that last season when you were playing with the Huskies, Eldridge?
Oh, it was terrible. That's all I remember, man. It was like living a nightmare. Lynn Nance came in. He didn't want anybody from Andy Russo era. He wanted to bring in his own guys. I was the team captain, so I was the ringleader. So he came after me, man. I just remember being absolutely miserable. That was the summer that we went to Australia. So that's 1989 going into 1990, the summer of 1989. And I remember him pulling me to the side because one of my teammates was messing up the plays. And he was like, "Oh, you think that's funny? Your teammate's messing up the plays. That's why you're not going to start when we go to Australia." So I'm looking at him, I'm thinking, have you seen our team? If you don't start me, we really don't have a damn chance. But lo and behold, man, we got down there and I didn't start not one game. He told me you weren't going to start. Yeah, I didn't start one game, man. He had the weirdest rule I've ever seen in my life, Adam. He didn't want you to jump off of one leg for layups. He wanted you to come to a power jump stop. He used to say, you got to parallel your shoulders to the baseline and grow up strong because you want to avoid the charge. And my theory was, I'm a senior in college. If I don't know how to avoid a charge by this time, nothing else is going to help me. So every time I jumped off of one leg, man, in the game, he would snatch me out of the game. But I remember playing pretty well down there in Australia. I fell in love with Australia, man, to be honest with you. When we went to Sydney, I just thought it was the most beautiful city I had ever seen. So me and my wife named our first daughter Sydney. I remember going out to the Great Barrier Reef, had a great time. And I think the thing that stands out the most to me, man, is I just remember seeing kangaroos and koala bears the way you see cats and dogs here in America. They were everywhere. And I was just like, wow, you got to be kidding me, man. And the other thing I think that stands out to me that was pretty cool is just seeing all the Aboriginal people, man. I just remember seeing them fishing in some of the local rivers and bodies of water down there. And I thought that was really cool as well.
That's fantastic. I'm glad that you enjoyed Australia. And obviously it made a lasting impact if you've named a daughter after the city of Sydney. So that's fantastic memories for you, no doubt. You left colleges with averages of 14.5 points, almost 4 boards, and over 3 assists per game. And according to the 2019 record book, you're ranked 9th all-time to this day in career points at 1,700 exactly, 8th in assist, and also you're 9th in three-point percentage. So some fantastic achievements there. What sort of stands out most from the 4 seasons that you spent playing with Washington? You're a captain 3 years in a row. You had some great individual achievements. Your first season playing was fantastic. Sort of what could sort of stand out the most out of all those things that you did in those 4 seasons?
I think the thing that probably stands out to me the most is probably playing against Gary Payton. Me and Gary went to school all 4 years together. We used to go at it every year. I was at Washington. He was at Oregon State. And we used to go at it, man. All he did was talk smack. But I think we probably split our series, and I always had pretty good games. And other than that, I think just being a part of a great conference. I mean, the Pac-10 has some awesome schools, man. When you think about UCLA, USC, Arizona State, Oregon State, Washington State. Now you add Utah and Colorado. But it just was a lot of fun. I think the thing I looked the most forward to when I first joined the Pac-10, obviously was going to UCLA and just seeing where John Wooden, made history with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Bill Walton. I think any basketball player in the world, when they walk in that gym for the first time, you're just like, wow, you can't believe it because there's so much history. And then after that, going down to Arizona, man, because I don't care how cold and wet and nasty it was here in Seattle in December and January. It seemed like it was always 80 to 85 degrees down there. So I think everybody looked forward to going to Arizona State during the winter and seeing some summer-like weather. So that was probably my favorite trip, was going to Arizona.
Now, I was quite surprised to read that you didn't receive any invites to the NBA combines or pre-draft camps or whatnot. So you decided to play in the LA Pro Summer League and also had a tryout with the New Jersey Nets and the Indiana Pacers. How was your time playing Summer League to begin with? What was that experience like?
You said you were surprised, so imagine how I felt. I was 3 times all Pac-10, man. At the least, I thought, I would get drafted in the second round, and when it didn't happen, I just remember being devastated, not knowing what I was going to do. So you're right. I went out to L.A. to play in the Summer League. Back then in those days, in 1990, the Summer League took place at Loyola Marymount University, and I was with the New Jersey Nets. And I'm laughing because Anthony Mason was on my team. And this is the weirdest thing I've ever seen in my life, man. So Rick Carlisle was our Summer League coach. But Rick Carlisle tried out for the team and was in camp for tryouts. He got cut. Then the next thing you know, he's our coach. And I'll never forget, we're playing in the summer league. If your listeners remember Anthony Mason, who played for the New York Knicks, the Charlotte Hornets. Well, at this point, Mace I think he had just finished his rookie year. This 1990. So his rookie year was 1989 with the New Jersey Nets. And I'll never forget it, man. He used to love, if your listeners remember Mace, he was a forward, but he would get the rebound, and he loved to bring the ball up the court. So in the summer league, he's getting the rebound, he's bringing the ball up the court. And he's 6'9", he's chiseled out of granite, strong as a bull. And then Rick Carlisle's telling me, you need to tell Anthony Mason to give you the ball. And I'm like, you need to tell Anthony Mason to give me the ball. I'm not telling Anthony Mason nothing. You're the coach. So he tells Anthony Mason, Mace, when you get the rebound, give the ball to Eldridge. So Mace doesn't say anything. So the horn blows to go back out on the court, man. Mace gets the rebound, he brings it up again. Mace gets the next rebound, he brings it up again. So Rick Carlisle calls timeout. He said, Anthony Mason, you're done. Hit the shower. And Mace looked at him and said, no, you're done. You hit the damn shower. And I was like, man, this is what the NBA is like? It was just absolutely hilarious. That same team, the Nets that year drafted a guy named Tate George. He hit a big shot for UConn in the NCAA tournament. So me and Tate were roommates. And I actually thought I played pretty good. But because Tate was the draft pick, they had to keep him. So I got cut. Went on and tried out for the Indiana Pacers and kind of got caught up in the same thing, a numbers game, even though I don't think I played as well for Indiana as I did with the Nets.
That's an outstanding story there about Anthony Mason, and thanks for sharing.
Anthony Mason was a character, Adam. I'm telling you, man. And everybody was scared of him, including the coaches.
Oh, man, I was scared of watching just through the TV when he was playing back with the Knicks in those days. One of your college rivals, who you talked about, Gary Payton, was selected by Seattle with the second pick in the 1990 draft. Were you watching that draft fairly closely, and where does it sit with you now? Later this month will be 30 years since that draft actually took place.
Yeah, I remember watching it. Obviously Derek Coleman went number 1, Gary Payton went number 2. I remember Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, who was known as Chris Jackson back then. He got drafted in that draft. I just kept waiting to see my name, and I knew I wouldn't get drafted in the first round. I knew I didn't have a good enough senior season, but I was just hoping that I would get picked late by somebody. And when it didn't happen, I just remember just being stunned. I still have the draft handwritten. I hand wrote down everybody that got drafted. I still have it somewhere here in my house. And every now and then I'll glance back at it. I'll look at some guys that were drafted, that didn't really end up playing in the NBA. And I look at myself playing 8 years. I actually should have played more, but, playing 8 years, and I go, wow. I just always felt that I kind of got blackballed by my college coach, a guy named Lynn Nance, man. My senior year didn't go like I planned, and it ended up hurting me as far as the NBA.
I appreciate the honesty, and no doubt that served as some great motivation for you for the best part of 5 years till your NBA journey began. Given that you were overlooked at the 1990 draft, you headed to Europe to play professionally with a team called TTL Bamberg.
Yeah.
In Germany's National League. How did that opportunity present itself?
Adam, I went to the summer league. I went to some NBA summer camps, and I just wasn't getting any action, man. I didn't know what I was going to do. I reached out to a guy, and he said, hey, I'm looking for a team. He said, hey, I know a guy in Germany. And I was like, Germany? He's like, yeah, he used to play for John Wooden. His name is Terry Schofield. He coaches the team over there. And the guy picked up the phone, called, and said, yeah, we'd love to have it. The next thing I know, I'm on a plane to Frankfurt, Germany, and the guy picks me up in a Mercedes. Next thing I know, he's going 150 miles an hour on the Autobahn. I'm scared to death. I'm like, what the hell? He's like, relax. Everybody drives that fast over here. I'm like, man, I just got here. I don't want to die. But Terry Schofield was my coach. He played for some of the great John Wooden teams at UCLA in the late 60s. I got to be honest, Adam, I had a blast over there, man. I was in a little town called Bamberg. It was like a mini Venice, Italy, man. I mean, it was absolutely gorgeous. The basketball was fun. Had a chance to see Berlin, had a chance to go to Vienna, had a chance to go to Hungary. And this was right when the Berlin Wall came down. So it was just a really, really interesting time in history. But my wife came with me. I took her out of school. I think her parents almost had a heart attack. She was going through her senior year. But we went over there, man, because we were in love, and we had a great time. So my first year out at the University of Washington, I played in the Bundesliga, over in Germany, and had a chance to play against my college teammate, Chris Belt, who was playing for a team called Leverkusen over there at that time. I think it's probably still one of the powers. And then the other big team that I remember over there was a team called Alba Berlin. I think Alba Berlin and Leverkusen are probably two of the top teams still in the European Cup over there.
I think Leverkusen was also the team that Detlef Schrempf played for before he came to the States. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. Same program.
Yeah, rightio. That team you played with actually had a USA tour later the same year. So how did it feel for you to return back home to the States 3 or 4 months or whatever it was after you headed over to Germany and you were playing games back here in America?
Man, I was happy, but it was weird. I didn't know that was going to happen. I think we played Arizona State. I know we played Cal State Bakersfield, but yeah, I just was happy to get a chance to come back to the States, man. And I don't know if college basketball still does it, Adam, but back in those days, you know, if you were in college in the exhibition games used to be against European teams, Australian teams, something like that every single year. So I was a part of one of those European teams that came back and played against some of the college teams over here in the States, and it was really cool. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's probably something I'm sure you wouldn't have envisaged a few years earlier, that you'd be part of a touring team to play in the States. So it's quite a unique experience. I believe that your next team that you joined would be the Louisville Shooters of the Global Basketball Association. It was the first season that was taking place in November of 91. How was that experience of joining a new league, and what did you make of that time there in Louisville?
Oh, man, it was crazy. It was the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life, man. First of all, we had an all-white ball. You know, Commissioner Mike Storm, who just passed away, he wanted to be different, so we had all-white basketball. Our coach was the legendary Johnny Newman, who played at Ole Miss. He averaged like 40-something points a game, I think, a couple years in college. But we had some hell of a college players, man. We had Milt Wagner from the University of Louisville. We had Frederick Hughes, who was a first-round draft pick from Loyola Chicago. We had Barry Sumter from Louisville. We had a big guy named Doug Roth, a 7-footer from Tennessee, a guy named Reggie Hansen, Joey Wright from Texas, Darrell Porter from Pitt. We had some really, really good players. And we were playing and we bussed everywhere. I remember one time we bussed from Louisville, Kentucky to Wichita, Kansas. I mean, it was like an 18-hour bus ride, man. It was crazy. And the front of the bus had couches. The middle of the bus had bunk beds. And then the back of the bus had couches. So the two veteran guys, Frederick Hughes and Milt Wagner, claimed the back to themselves. The coaches had the front, Johnny Newman and a guy named John Whitten. And then the rest of us 8 players were in the middle. And Adam, I don't know if there's projects or housing developments in Australia, man, but it felt like you were in the projects, because when you close both those doors, the air wouldn't circulate. Everybody would be sleeping in there damn near butt-ass naked because it was hot as hell. So it was hilarious, man. And then one day we're playing, and you go to the office to pick up your check, and you notice that there's no furniture in the office. And I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on? So the whole league folded. And I remember the team owner asking us if we wanted to play without getting paid. And everybody said, hell no, I'm going home. So in the middle of the season, man, the league just up and folded, and that was it. And it never rebounded. I don't think most people even ever heard of the Global Basketball Association, the GBA. But, yeah, it was a league back in 91, 92 that went under and never resurfaced.
Yeah, I didn't actually know that it folded throughout the season there, so I knew that it had only just started in that inaugural year. And I didn't know they played with an all-white basketball as well. That's
all-white basketball, yep. It was weird.
Yeah. You mentioned Joey Wright there. He's spent the best part of the last 15 to 20 years here in Australia. I think he's won the Coach of the Year for the National Basketball League here maybe 2 or 3 times. So he's had a massive impact here on Australian basketball for a couple of decades.
Yeah, great guy, man. Played at the University of Texas with a guy named Lance Blanks and Travis Mays. He was drafted, I think, by the Phoenix Suns. He didn't make it. And then I think he ended up playing over in Australia, stayed and became a coach, and he's still down there. I still talk to Joey all the time. I usually see him, during the summer at the NBA Summer League. He usually comes back and checks that out, and I think he's scouting some players. I know he was with the Adelaide 36ers last, but I think they parted ways, so I'm not really sure what he's going to do next. But, yeah, Joey's a great guy, man. Been knowing Joey since 1991.
Yeah, good to hear. Yeah, he just ended his tenure, I think, with the Adelaide 36ers, so you're spot on there.
Yeah.
Later in 1992, you signed with a team in the Philippines Basketball Association. It's probably one of the great team names of all time, the Presto Ice Cream Kings. You lit it up over there. What was that experience like playing in the Philippines, and how was the level of basketball compared to what you'd been used to prior to that?
I don't know about the great names, but it's definitely when people hear it, they go, the what? The Presto Ice Cream King. You know what, man? I don't think I've ever seen a country as excited about basketball as the Philippines. When I got off the plane, Adam, people knew who I was, man. It was unbelievable. And I would watch kids and adults playing basketball 1, 2 o'clock in the morning with no shoes on down there. It was the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life, man. So I was in a 6'4" and under league. And when I went to measure to see if I was legitimately under 6'4". They told me to try to bend my knees so I could measure under 6 foot because I could come back and play in a 6 foot and under league. I was like, wait a minute, I'm 6'3". Don't worry about it. Just bend your knees a little bit. I was like, what? So it was crazy, man. But I tell you, the greatest story that I can tell you from the Philippines is when I got over there, I kept hearing about this guy that scored 100 points in the game. And it's a guy that I knew named Tony Harris, who played at the University of New Orleans, played in the NBA for a little while with the Boston Celtics and some other teams. And they're telling me that Tony Harris scored 100 points. And I'm like, no way in hell somebody can score 100 points in a 20-minute game. So we played Tony Harris and his team. And in the first half, at halftime, he had 56 points, Adam. 56. He ended up with 96 points for the game. Everything he threw up went in, man. He was just like a one-man wrecking crew. They just gave him the ball and got out of his way. But the Philippines was absolutely crazy. They had 16 teams. All the teams played in one arena. So in one day, they would have like a quadruple header with 12 to 16,000 people. I mean, it was absolutely phenomenal. And they called Tony Harris the Hurricane because he was going to do some damage. So when we played this team, they said, oh, the Hurricane is coming. I thought it was hilarious, man. But they had a guy down there. He was, I guess you could say he was the Michael Jordan of the Philippines. His name was Ron Jaworski. He was a legend down there. But guys were smoking cigarettes at halftime, man. It was the craziest league I'd ever seen in my life. I remember it was 120 degrees every day, so I think I lost 20 pounds the first week I was down there. And they had this thing called a brownout every day where they were trying to conserve energy. So from 12 o'clock to 3 o'clock every single day, they shut down all the power. Man, it was the craziest thing I had ever seen in my life, man. The Philippines is absolutely bananas.
Sounds like it was a pretty wild setup. Do you remember what your single game high score might have been during that time?
What, I averaged like 47 points a game, and they told me I was a disappointment. I was like, I ain't never averaged 47 points a game. We needed you to average more like 56, 57. I said, what? Yeah, I averaged 47, Adam, but they said it wasn't good enough, man. They were disappointed.
Wow. They got some high standards over there in the Philippines.
Oh, my God. It was through the roof, man.
That's crazy. Some good stories there. Thanks for sharing these. Now, I believe your next team to play with was the Yakima Sun Kings of the Continental Basketball Association for the 1993 season in the CBA, and you led the team in scoring at more than 17 points a game. What was it like to begin your time in the CBA, which ultimately you would end up getting that call up to the NBA in a couple of years from that time?
You know, Yakima was great for me, man. Yakima is out here in the Northwest where I live. It's 2 hours away from Seattle. Looking back over my career, Adam, I regret not going to Yakima first. But when I got out of college, all I heard was the CBA's pay was terrible. The travel was terrible. You don't want to play there. So that's why I went to Germany my first year out. But when I came back and played in Yakima in 92, 93, I mean, I had a blast, man, because I was close to home. I used to drive home almost every other day. But the competition was just through the roof. I mean, if you were 6'7" under, man, the CBA was just absolutely tough. You know, all the big guys that could play, they were all in the NBA. If you were 6'9" or taller, and you were halfway decent, you were in the NBA. But it was so many guys that were talented, especially my size at 6'3". It just was a ton of guys. That picture you sent me of that guy in the picture, the first one, when I was with the Louisville Shooters, is a guy named Jay Taylor, who was one of the best scorers in CBA history, man. I remember he used to light us up and give us the business. But my first year, we weren't very good. You know, we were the laughing stock of the league. We were the worst team in the league. My second year, we weren't much better. But my third year in the CBA, we ended up winning a championship. I was named MVP of the league. I think maybe 4 or 5 guys on my team got called up. Chucky Brown got called up to the Houston Rockets, won a world championship. The same thing with Larry Robinson. And, of course, I got called up to the Houston Rockets the next year. But Yakima was great for me, man. It gave me a chance to pursue my dream of playing in the NBA, and I'll never forget it. I had an absolute ball over it. The travel was horrible. You know, we were on first available flights every morning. I mean, if you played a game and the game ended at 10, you got back to the hotel at midnight, you had to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and catch the first flight. And I can remember, Adam, I swear to God, man, flights would get delayed due to bad weather in the winter, and we would get to the game at 7 o'clock. Tip-off was at 7:15. It was crazy, man. You walk right out of the bus, run into the locker room, change, you're on the court. Couldn't really take it easy because you never knew when the NBA scouts was going to be there, so you had to give it your best every time you stepped on the floor. And one of the things that was unique about the CBA that I don't think no other league in the world had at that time, they played every game by quarters. You got points for winning quarters. So you got 1 point for winning every quarter, and I think you got 3 points for winning the game. So you could win the game and damn near still lose the overall point total, which was kind of crazy. But it made the game really competitive and made guys play for the entirety of the game and not get a 20-point lead and then just relax.
Yeah, it sounds like a really unique league. It's always intrigued me, and any of the previous guests I've had on the show that have talked about their CBA experience have always spoke about how different it was, but how much overall they generally enjoyed their time playing in the CBA, aside from travel, perhaps. But you mentioned those NBA scouts. The 15th CBA All-Star Game was held at the Hartford Civic Centre on January the 24th of 95. I was just reading up about it this morning. There were 50 NBA scouts in attendance, from what I've read. And you hit 2 crucial free throws with about 10 seconds left to seal the win. It was a 119 to 115 win for your National All-Stars. I read a quote the following day where you said, "I'm out of college 5 years now. It's reaching the point where I'm going to have to get up to the NBA real soon, or else I'll have to go overseas and make some good money before my playing days are over. So I've got some pressure on me." So that obviously says a lot about your experiences, and we've covered a majority of those from when you left college to this point. How important was that 1995 CBA season? You obviously had the season MVP award. You won the CBA championship. You defeated the Pittsburgh Piranhas. You led the league in three-point shooting at almost 50%, which is outstanding, and averaged more than 20 points a game. So all those things came to one sort of big moment where you made yourself well known in front of all these scouts, and then that ultimately, I guess, must have helped a lot in terms of getting your name on the radar to be a call-up to the NBA not long after.
I'll start with the CBA All-Star Game, and I appreciate you doing your homework, Adam. I remember playing for the great Flip Saunders, man. Your listeners know who Flip Saunders is. He was the coach of the Minnesota Timberwolves, but back in 1995, he was a coach in the CBA with the Sioux Falls Skyforce. So Flip was my coach. I didn't play as well as I wanted to in that All-Star Game because I was a little bit nervous. And I remember I lost to my teammate Chucky Brown in the three-point shoot contest, and I still can't get over it. I don't know how the hell that happened. But Chucky made it to the finals before me because I think I was just nervous, man. But you asked me what did that 95 season mean to me. It meant everything because that was my third year, and I was getting a lot of pressure, man. People saying, you don't make it this year, you might as well just get a regular job. And I always knew I had enough talent to play in the NBA. So that year I just said to myself, I said, you know what, E? You got to work on your game, man. You got to go in here this season and play so well that they don't have no choice but to call you up. I said, just give it one more shot. And I got lucky. Halfway through that season, we got a new coach, a guy named Mo McCone, who was a longtime coach in the NBA with the San Antonio Spurs. He coached George Gervin. He pulled me to the side because up until that point, I had been playing the two guard. And he pulled me to the side. He said, E, look, man, you're never going to make the NBA as a 6'3" two guard. The only way you can make it is as a point guard. He said, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to move you to the point guard position. I'll let you initiate the offense. If we can't get anything, I'll bring the ball back to you so you can do your thing. He said, I think that's the only way you're going to get called up. And that's what he did, man. And we started winning. And if you got any young kids out there that are listening to your show, I'll tell them this. People love winners. You can put up 30 on a bad team, but if you put up 20 on a good team that wins, everybody can get an opportunity. And that's what happened to us in Yakima. I said myself, Chucky Brown, Reggie Jordan, Anthony Goldwire, Dell Demps, all those guys went on to play in the NBA. I was named MVP. I went from being in Yakima, Washington, in the CBA to getting a call from Rudy Tomjanovich with the back-to-back world champion Houston Rockets saying we want to sign you. I said, excuse me? He's like, yeah, we want to sign you. And the next thing you know, I'm in practice with Hakeem Olajuwon and Clyde Drexler. I'm like, you got to be kidding me, man. I had to pinch myself. I'm living an example, man, that dreams come true. And if you're willing to put in the hard work, then anything is possible.
Beautifully said. Great to hear this sort of stuff. Thanks again for sharing it. Just before we touch on your time with the Rockets, as fate would have it, due to a knee surgery that he had to have, your former high school teammate Robert Pack was put on the Denver Nuggets injured list in early March of 1995. A couple of personnel moves led to you then signing a 10-day contract with the Nuggets on the 3rd of March. How did it feel to get that long-awaited call-up to get a taste of the NBA just prior to then signing on, as you mentioned, a phone call from Rudy T?
Oh, Adam, man, it was like getting a gorilla off your back. Because, I was playing absolutely fantastic. I think at the time I might have been averaging 25 points a game. I was almost shooting 60% from the field from three. I was on fire. And every time we went on the road to the CBA, guys would be looking at me like, man, how come you haven't gotten called up yet? And I was like, man, I don't know. And I remember going to my coach saying, what's going on? He said, well, somebody's dropping the ball. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you're playing great. I'm calling every team in the league. He was like, that only leaves one person. I said, you talk about my agent? He was like, yeah. I don't think your agent is working that hard for you. But I finally got a chance with the Denver Nuggets, and as fate would have it, man, I'm filling in for my high school teammate Robert Pack. Adam, I still can't believe that, man. This was before the days of emailing and cell phones and all that stuff. But I just had all those guys. I had Robert Pack, Dikembe Mutombo, LaFonso Ellis, Brian Stith, and Dale Ellis all on the text chain talking about my time on a 10-day because I didn't get a lot of playing time. And I remember the one game I did get some playing time. I got fouled and I was at the free throw line. And Dale Ellis, who was a friend of mine who had played for the Seattle Sonics, we used to work out together in the summer. He's heckling me the whole time I'm at the free throw line, making me more nervous than what I already am. So it was just crazy, man. But Robert was hurt, so I really didn't see him the few times we had practice because I was only with him for 10 days, and we were on the road most of it. And I tell you, Adam, man, I still remember when they released me and I had to go back to Yakima, man, I was depressed. I just never forget how bad I felt because I felt like, Eldridge, you got your chance and you blew it, man. You didn't make the best of it. You should have stuck. As fate would have it, I ended up going on to a better situation with Houston Rockets.
That's a great little story there about Dale Ellis. He's a former guest and a friend of the show, and I met him very briefly over in Chicago when we met in person in February of this year. That was March of 95 that you played with the Nuggets, and then it was September of 1995 when you got that phone call you said there from Rudy Tomjanovich. Do you remember where you were when you took that call, and then how did it feel after you hung up just to know that you were going to be part of the defending champion Rockets, just coming off basically back-to-back NBA championships? Oh, yeah, man. Let me back up a little bit. The Rockets called me and told me they wanted to bring me in for a workout. So I said, okay. And back in those days, you normally worked out with one or two other players that they were looking at. But for some reason, I had a one-on-one workout with Rudy Tomjanovich, and all we did, Adam, was shoot. And I was thinking to myself, damn, if all we're going to do is shoot, I'm in business because I know I can shoot the rock. Rudy was rebounding for me. So Rudy was putting me through all these drills. When I say Rudy, for your listeners, I'm talking about Rudy Tomjanovich, a former NBA player, the great coach. He's putting me through all these drills, and I'm nervous as hell. But I shoot the ball pretty good. And I remember him saying, okay, you shot the ball pretty good. And I remember saying, Coach, you know what? Let me do it again, man. He's like, no, you shot the ball great. I said, no, I can do better than that. Let me do it again. I was a little bit nervous. So he said, okay. So he put me through the whole workout again, man. I just shot the damn lights out. And he's like, man, we really like you. We like the way you shot the ball. We'll be in touch. Well, hell, I had heard that line the whole 5 years before. I went tried out for the San Antonio Spurs one time when they had Jerry Tarkanian, and I played better than anybody else in the damn camp and didn't get invited back to the vet camp. So I was like, well, nothing's probably going to happen. So I came back home. And you asked if I remember where I was. Of course, man, I was on my deck at my first house that I bought here in Bellevue, Washington, but about 2 miles from here, 3 miles from here. And the phone rings, and I'm looking, and I see the call ID to saying it's the Houston Rockets. And it's Rudy Tomjanovich, and he's like, hey, yo, we just want to let you know we want to offer you a contract. Man, I said, what? He's like, yeah, we want to sign you. Man, I just remember letting out this giant scream. I screamed for my wife who was in the house. I was like, baby, come out here. The Rockets want to sign me. And, man, just what a great feeling, to put in all that hard work and to finally be rewarded for it. That first season with Houston, you averaged almost 7 points and 3 assists in only 20 minutes a game. You played in 63 games and started 27 times, which is very good, of course. I had a look at your stats today on basketballreference.com. 23 times you had 10 or more points, and 3 times you went for 20 or more. So you had some really great performances through that first season. What was the step up like in the intensity being on the defending back-to-back champion team compared to all the previous levels you'd played at before? How did you adjust, and just what was it like in general? It was amazing, man. I couldn't believe it, Adam. I'm from New Orleans, so I got a lot of family down south. And I remember when I got to Houston, this is a funny story. I remember when I got to Houston, I called my cousin and I said, hey, man, I'm in town. He said, for what? I said, I just signed with the Rockets. He said, no, really? What are you doing in town? I said, no, I just signed with the Rockets. He couldn't believe it either. And my cousin, his name was Orrin Williams, man. He looked just like Clyde Drexler, but he was only about 5'10". Same ball head, same face, same everything, man. It just was unreal being out there playing against Kenny Smith and Sam Cassell and Mario Elie and Clyde Drexler. Like I said, man, it was a dream come true. And when I first got there, I wasn't playing at all. But one day, Rudy T came to me after practice, and he said, hey, he called me Rook, even though I was 27 years old at the time. And he said, hey, Rook. And I said, Rook. I said, Coach, I'm 27. He said, yeah, I know, but you're a rookie. So he called me Rook. That was my nickname. He said, I see how hard you're working. Just keep working hard, and I'm going to give you a shot. And I just thought it was some talk, man, to be honest with you. But I kept playing hard because I was just happy to be in the league. And I'll never forget, we went to Atlanta. We were on the road. Most basketball players take a nap during the day. And I was taking a nap at about 2 o'clock, and the phone rang in my room, and it was Rudy Tomjanovich. He said, hey, Rook, is coach. He said, I want you to get ready. You're starting tonight. And I was like, I'm starting tonight? He said, yeah. I said, against Mookie Blaylock?
He said, yeah. And I'm thinking to myself, well, shit, can I start tomorrow night? I don't want to start against Bookie Blaylock. He's one of the toughest defensive guards in the league. He was like, get ready. Man, I remember, Adam, I think the first 3 games I started, man, I really struggled because I was nervous as hell. But after that, I settled down. As you said, I started almost 30 games. You know, I thought I played really, really well. And I didn't go back to the bench until right before the playoffs. And I remember Rudy T coming to me again saying, you know, he wanted to reinsert Kenny Smith into the lineup because that's the guy he won 2 championships with. And I couldn't argue with that. But playing with the Rockets, man, playing with Akeem Olajuwon and Clyde Drexler was like, it was like traveling with the Beatles, man. Your folks down in Australia probably know what the Beatles are. That's what it was like. It was unreal. I don't care if we got in at 3 a.m. in a snowstorm and the hotel was packed with people waiting, man. It was absolutely unbelievable.
Must have been some kind of experience. There's a few YouTube highlights of your NBA playing days, which I had a look at in the last few days. And there's a game where it's at Seattle and you're being introduced onto the floor and Chucky Brown came on just after you in terms of the introductions, who was a fellow CBA teammate of yours, as you talked about. How special was it for you to be part of that Rockets team at that period of time, just on the back of the great success they had enjoyed and where it sort of rates overall in your whole basketball experience? Probably even hard to put into words, I guess.
Oh, no, it was awesome, Adam, because I remember it, man. You know, when I signed with the Rockets, you know, the guy they had the most problems with was Gary Payton. You know, and I remember telling Rudy Tomjanos, well, hell, I'm not scared of Gary because all our guards were scared of him. I said, I'm not scared of Gary, man. I've been playing against Gary since 1986, and he was looking at me like I was crazy. And, you know, 3 of those 4 regular season games I played really well at. I remember one game I had 21 in Houston. I think when we came to Seattle, I had 16. And I think in another game we had 11. And then in the playoffs, I was back on the bench, so I didn't really play. And I was really disappointed, man, because I was looking forward to – because Gary used to talk a whole lot of smack, man. That's all he did. If you didn't fight it back, you were going to get it. And he knew that I wasn't ever going to back down from him. But I think my Houston Rockets experience was probably the most fun because the team was so high profile. I never forget that year, man. I didn't have to pay for anything. Anytime I went out to a restaurant to eat, it was free. They gave me a free car to drive. I got free clothes. You got free everything, man, because everybody loves a winner. More people recognize me from the Houston Rockets than any other team that I've ever played with, Adam. It's because it was so high profile, man. So the Houston Rockets, the Rudy T, Clyde, Hakeem Olajuwon, Sam Cassell, Robert Horry, man, it just was like a dream come true.
Great to hear these stories. I really appreciate you sharing them with us. In late September of 96, you signed as a free agent with the Atlanta Hawks. How did you actually wind up in Atlanta?
You know, I had a chance to go to the Lakers, and I'll never forget my agent wanted me to go to L.A., but I was a small-town Southern guy, man. I just didn't think I was no L.A. guy. Plus, I heard L.A. had, like, crazy taxes. It was really expensive to live. But, you know, Shaq was out there, but I wanted to go to Atlanta because I knew Atlanta had Lenny Wilkins. He was a great coach, and then Atlanta was only 6 hours from New Orleans, where my mother was, and I figured I could get home a lot. So I remember my agent being pissed with me, but I said, no, man, I'm not signing with the Lakers. I want to sign with Atlanta. He didn't like the Atlanta Hawks management at the time, but I ended up going to Atlanta, and I absolutely loved it, man. We had a great team, but, you know, just like everybody else, we couldn't get past Michael Jordan and the Bulls, but, you know, we had the Kim Mutombo, Christian Laettner, Steve Smith, Mookie Blaylock. I mean, Adam, we had a squad. We had a really, really good team.
They were a great team, no doubt. In 1997, you played 71 out of a possible 82 regular season games with the Hawks. And as you mentioned there, you ran into the defending NBA champs at that time, the Chicago Bulls, in the second round of the playoffs. What was that postseason like, particularly matching up against Jordan and Chicago?
You know, Adam, we matched up good with them, man. We matched up well with them in the regular season. They had the home court advantage, so we went to Chicago. We lost, I think, game 1 by 3. We won game 2. And I thought we should have been up 2-0 coming back to Atlanta. I mean, what can you say when you play against Michael, the greatest player in the world, man? And, you know, all you can do is pray that he don't embarrass you with your mother watching. And that's the attitude I took in there. You know, I said to myself, this guy is the best player in the league. He gives everybody the business. So if he gives you the business, Eldridge, it's no big deal. What do you have to lose, man? Just go out there and lay it on the line. And that's what I tried to do. I didn't back down from Michael at all. When I tell you he was amazing, man. I've said this story several times. I mean, I don't think Hollywood could script a movie better than what Michael Jordan did in real life. That's how goddamn good he was, man. He never disappointed his fans. The first time I played against him was with the Rockets, and he was on me like white on rice, man. And I remember thinking to myself, but damn, somebody must have told him I said something about it, you know? Because I was like, wow, he's guarding the hell out of me. So finally I asked him, I said, man, why are you guarding me so tight? And he looked me dead in my eye, and he said, I just want you to know why I'm considered the best. And ever since then, man, I've always had respect for him because when I played against other veteran guys that were stars, they would look at me and say, Eldridge Recasner, oh, hell, that ain't nobody. I ain't got to worry about him. Then after I would hit a couple shots, they would come and guard me. But Mike from the get-go, man, was guard me like I was goddamn Joe Dumars or somebody. I mean, he was on me, man, and that's how he played against everybody. In my playing days, I haven't seen anybody better, man. He was the best offensive player and one of the best defensive players in the league. And that's what separates him on the list when you start talking about the great players, Larry Birds, Magic Johnson, all those guys, LeBron, Kareem. I've never seen anybody that was the best offensive player in the league and the damn best defensive player at the same time, man. That's how good he was. He would get his 30, but he would stop the other stars from getting their 25. And like I said, man, he was just absolutely amazing.
There's a great photo of you playing defense on Jordan. You're right up in his grill. I'm sure you know the one I'm referring to. I don't see that on the back of your wall in the background there, but do you have that photo somewhere?
My wife won't let me put it in the living room, man. I don't know what's wrong with it, Adam. This is my stairwell. I'm trying to put it in the living room. She won't let me put it in there. But you know, I think back in 2011, I started a basketball academy, and one day one of my kids was like, oh, Daddy, you should use this on your website. And I was like, where did you get that from? I had never seen it before. Just what a great picture, man, and just what a great honor it is to be able to say you played against, one of the greatest players that ever played the game. And back then, they would actually let you get into people and touch them. So I'm all up in this grill, Adam. And I'm telling everybody, I got him on lockdown, and that's the story that I'm sticking to based on the picture.
I love it. It is a great photo. There's no doubt about that. 1998 was your best individual scoring season. You averaged almost 10 points a game. And There was a mid-April game at Charlotte, and you had a season-high 23 points. Your Hawks would meet the Hornets in the 1998 playoffs. Do you think that those performances helped you in terms of eventually signing with Charlotte as a free agent in 1999?
Oh, no doubt. No doubt at all. I played well against those guys in the regular season. I credit all that to Lenny Wilkins, man. Lenny was a guard in his playing days, so most of his sets were designed for guards. He used to run the old UCLA high post offense, man, and I still smile, every time I see somebody else running because I just remember how much success I had in it, initiating that offense, cutting off, and then coming off a down screen for all those jump shots. And I just had an absolutely great time in Atlanta. In Houston, Elijah Wan was the man. We gave him the ball all the time, and if he wanted to throw it back out, he would. But in Atlanta, it was a true offense where everybody got a chance to get some shots. And like I said, Lenny Wilkins, one of the greatest basketball minds of all time, man. I really, really enjoyed my time in Atlanta. That was my most fun as a player. Even though Houston was a more high-profile team, I really enjoyed my time with the Atlanta Hawks.
In the 1999 lockout shortened season, you had a career-high 26 points in 28 minutes against the Milwaukee Bucks. It was in late March. You made 5 of 7 threes, according to Basketball Reference. Do you actually remember that particular game?
Of course I remember it. Dale Curry was guarding me, Steph Curry's dad. I was giving Dale the business in that game, man. Just had a great game, man. I remember that. But like I said, it was a fun time. I had a lot of freedom when I was with the Atlanta Hawks, and of course that led to my contract with the Charlotte Hornets, the 4-year deal that I ended up getting. From that time in Charlotte, is there anything particular that you wanted to touch on, what you enjoyed or otherwise being part of the Charlotte Hornets? Had some great teammates, man, some relationships that I still have today. I actually just talked to Baron Davis yesterday. Baron was a rookie, while I was there. I kind of took him under my wing, but I still talk to David Wesley, Eldon Campbell, Derek Coleman, all those guys. It wasn't the best time for me as a player, Adam, because me and Paul Silas, we didn't get along, man. And he just wasn't going to play me. And that's when my career took a turn. Me and Derek Coleman got into a car accident. I fractured my collarbone. I had a collapsed lung. And I just never got a chance to play after that, man. And I really regret that, because I thought I could have played more than 10 years in the NBA and had a really good career because I'll be honest with you, Adam, I wasn't the best player, but I feel like I was the best shooter on every team I played on in the NBA. World champion Houston Rockets included, definitely Atlanta and Charlotte as well. I could flat out, shoot the open jump shots. Just didn't get a chance to finish out my career the way that I wanted to due to a bad accident. And of course, I don't know if your listeners remember Bobby Fields was another tragic death that year. Bobby got killed in a car accident as well. But, Charlotte wasn't exactly the most memorable part of my NBA career, though it was my most financially rewarding.
I appreciate you sort of sharing on that accident. I didn't want to necessarily bring it up, so I thought I'd just pose the question in that way. If you wanted to mention it, you could.
No, it's all good, man.
Did you have Dave Cowens as a coach prior to Paul Silas?
Yeah.
What was it like to play under Dave?
I love Dave, man. Dave was a great guy. You know, I'm laughing because it was the lockout year, Adam, so all the big guys got way out of shape. Eldon Campbell was overweight. Derek Coleman was overweight. And out of all the big men we had on the team, Dave Cowens was in better shape than the players. And I remember him hanging with all the players doing training camp talking about how he was in better shape than those guys. But, you know, Dave Cowens, man, the great Celtic, loved the game of basketball. But him and management did not see eye to eye at all. And I think Dave Cowens at that particular time in 99 was the lowest paid coach in the NBA. And he wasn't happy about it because he had took him to the playoffs the year before. I think Coach Cowens was making something like $600,000 a year, and he was pissed, man. So he just laid it down, and they ended up parting ways, and then Paul Silas took over the team. But, yeah, I like Dave Cowens. He was a good guy.
Yeah, I'm pleased to hear that. Now, your final season in the NBA was 2002, just before Christmas of 2001. You signed as a free agent with the Clippers and remained with them until, I think, early January. Did you contemplate signing with another team the following season or heading back overseas to continue your pro career? What sort of led to you finally saying, I'm going to hang up the shoes?
You know what, Adam? When you ask that question, I'm just sitting here thinking about it. I can remember it like it was yesterday. I signed a 10-day with the Clippers. Then they signed me for the rest of the season. Then they cut me and signed me to another 10-day. And this was all under Donald Sterling, who was one of the cheapest guys in the history of the NBA. And then I got cut, but I think people thought I was still hurt. But I had a chance to play for Nice in France. But my wife was pregnant, and they wanted me to come out the next day. And I was like, well, my wife is pregnant. She's in labor. She's about to have a baby. I want to be here for my baby. Can I come the day after tomorrow? And it was like, no, we need somebody by tomorrow. So I passed up on that, man. And then I never ended up playing again anywhere. I was excited about that opportunity to go to France because I had some friends that went over there and played. But, after that, I had some money in the bank, and I was like, you know what? I'll just go on into something else. I really wish I could have had a chance to finish out my career in the NBA. I think it didn't happen because of that accident, man. I think that just scared people.
Thank you again for your open and honest answers, Eldridge. Really appreciate it. You're a member of the Pac-12 Hall of Honor, the Washington Husky Hall of Fame, and also you were named, I believe, to the All-20th Century basketball team for the Huskies as well. There's some great achievements there. Where do you sort of rank those amongst everything you've done in your basketball life?
Oh, man, it was an honor. You know, I'll never forget 2010. I both went into the University of Washington Hall of Fame and the Pac-12 Hall of Honor. And I just don't think it doesn't get any better than that. You know, Adam, when people walk into the Hall of Fame at University of Washington, they see all the greatest players that ever played there, and they see the name Eldridge Recasner. That's just a good feeling. And the same thing with the Pac-12. When you listen up there, you know, in my class was Reggie Miller. You know, Reggie Miller went in the same year I went in, and I was saying to myself, damn, man, you're going into the Pac-12 Hall of Honor. It was the Pac-10 back then with Reggie Miller. So it's just a great feeling. I think those rank up there pretty close to the top. I would say number one for me would be signing with the Houston Rockets. That was a dream come true. But right behind that is winning the championship in Yakima, man, because we just had a great group of guys. We were the doormat of the league when I got there in 92, and in 95, you know, we ended as champions. I was MVP of the league. So I would think as far as my basketball career goes, those two things are 1, 2, and right at the top.
You just mentioned Yakima there. I believe only just recently they've celebrated the 25-year anniversary of that championship team. Have you had any chance to catch up with former teammates or people associated with the team since then, or just virtually because of the circumstances we're going through?
Yeah, we had a big Zoom call, I say about 2 or 3 weeks ago. We had a reunion planned for this month, on the 25th of this month, man, with the coronavirus. They put a damper on that. So I don't know if we'll get a chance to get together this year or not, but yeah, all the guys, we all keep in touch, man. We had a great Zoom call, telling stories and laughing and joking about the championship that year. But we had a true team. I think everybody knew their role, everybody played their role, and everybody accepted their role. And that's kind of rare, you know, in team sports. You don't see that happen all the time. And I think it's one of the reasons you see some organizations have great success, like the Lakers and the Celtics and the Bulls, now the Golden State Warriors. And then you see some organizations like the Clippers that don't. And there's a reason. You know, when you can get a group of guys to not care who gets the credit, and the ultimate goal is just to win, great things can happen, man. You know, it sounds kind of corny, but, you know, when you break it down, team together, everybody accomplishes more. That's just a true fact, man. And that's what it was in Yakima. And by me being the leader of that team and the team captain, that was really a special moment for me.
Now, I believe you've been an analyst with the Pac-12 networks for some years now. As that continues, once basketball hopefully resumes and gets back to some sort of normality, what have you enjoyed most about doing that sort of role?
Just going back to all the campuses, man, you know, where you played. Going back into Ralph Miller Court down at Oregon State. Oregon has a new arena now, but it's the same annoying, pesky fans or, you know, going to Beasley Coliseum up there at Washington State. It's just fun to stay connected to the game and then go back to some of those arenas that you played in and just reliving all those memories. Like I said, when I go back to Ralph Miller Court, the first thing I think about is Gary Payton yapping. I just got to laugh, man, because nothing's changed. The gym looks exactly the same 30 years later. It's just a lot of fun, you know, just going back down memory lane. And I love basketball, man. I love sharing my knowledge and my stories with the fans. When you're calling games in a conference that you played in, you don't have to do as much homework because you just know the history of the league. And I've been a member of the Pac-12 conference now for 35 years, man. So with the exception of guys like Bill Walton, there's not a whole lot of people that know more about the Pac-12 than I do. And I just absolutely love it, man. I hope we get a chance to have a college basketball season this year. And I hope I'm allowed to call some games because I know they laid off a lot of people. Well, I don't know if I'm going to be in the mix or not, but I sure hope I will because I really enjoy it.
Yeah, I hope that's the case too, for sure. Basketball Digest had a regular feature back in the day. It was called The Game I'll Never Forget. We may have already touched on it, but is there one particular game from your career that stands out the most?
I told you about the Arizona game when I had 29, when there were no one in the country. But I think the biggest moment for me was my senior year. You know, we were playing Oregon State here in Seattle. Sports Illustrated was following Gary Payton around because he was named their player of the year. And, man, was he talking crap. He was yapping to all my friends in the stands. And we ended up beating them, and I had 28 points. I think I was something like 12 or 16 from the field. So I would think that particular moment probably stands out the most to me just because of what he went on to do in the NBA. But, you know, Gary was a player of the year, not only in the Pac-12, but in the country that year for Sports Illustrated. And I think that'll probably be the thing that stands out most to me looking back on my college career at the University of Washington. Just all the battles I had against Gary Payton, just having a chance to shut him up that last time I was senior year.
Have you spoken with or seen Gary in person over the last few years, and do you reminisce fondly about those times, or is he still talking about all those times that he allegedly did so well against you?
You know what? It's funny, Adam, because we hated each other in college, man. I mean, I absolutely hated Gary. And a couple of times I thought we were going to get in a fight. That particular game I'm telling you about our senior year, you know, we both the team captains. You know, one captain comes to the center of the court to talk to the ref about the game plan, what to do and what not to do. And when we went to shake hands, he didn't shake my hand. He threw the ball in my stomach. Oh, man, I was pissed. I wanted to sock him. Just last summer, there's a big fundraiser here that a local restaurant owner hosts. It's called Kick Hunger Classic. We raise funds to fight hunger and feed the homeless. And I had a chance to talk to Gary. And he finally admitted, he was like, man, I just want to tell you, you know, you were a competitor, man. You never backed down. You know, I've always had respect for you. And I was looking at him. I thought he had too much to drink and had lost his damn mind because, you know, Gary would have never told you that when you were playing. But now we're great friends. I usually see him every year at the Pac-12 tournament. You know, I'll go down there and he's down there. And, you know, I got to tip my hat to Gary, though, man. He talked a lot of smack, but he backed it up. And by far, one of the greatest trash talkers and defensive players that ever played at the NBA level. He talked a lot of smack, but he backed it up. He was the real deal.
Now, the last question I have for you, did you have any particular significance to the jersey numbers that you wore during your career? I think at Washington you had number 5, same in Atlanta. You had number 7 at Denver and number 3 in Houston and Charlotte and number 14 with the Clippers.
There's a significance to all of those numbers. So my birthday is December 14th. So in high school, I wore number 14. After, I wore number 32 for Dr. J. When I kind of got to the age and I wanted my own identity, I chose the number 14. And that was my number. When I came to the University of Washington, they didn't have a 14. All they had was some weird numbers, and they had 5. So I thought to myself, okay, 1 + 4 = 5. I'll become number 5. So I wore number 5 my college career. I get to Yakima. They don't have number 5. So I say to myself, okay, 4 - 1 is 3. You're going to be number 3. So I be number 3. I took number 7 in Denver because that's all that they had. And I went back to 14, my last team with the Clippers. And when that happened, I was kind of going back and forth on what number I wanted. And I had a chance to be number 2, which was Derek Fisher's number with the Los Angeles Lakers. And I didn't want to do that because I didn't want to be compared to Derek Fisher. So I chose number 14, and I'll never forget, man, I said, you know what, this might be it because you're back to the number that it all started with. And lo and behold, the Los Angeles Clippers was my last team in the NBA. So I think for every player, a number has a significance, whether they're wearing a number that their favorite player wore or they're wearing a number that was their birthday like I did, or they're somehow trying to make one of those two things work. I think every player has a significance with their number.
It's great to hear the explanation behind it. Thanks for sharing. It's just been great to have you on the show today, Eldridge. Thanks very much for being so generous in speaking with me today, and I hope we can perhaps chat again sometime going forwards about some old school hoops.
Hey, Adam, thanks a lot for having me, man. It was a pleasure. I enjoyed meeting you in Chicago, and best of luck down there in Australia, man. Have a good night.
Thanks for listening. I welcome your interaction with the show. You can suggest topics or guests you want to hear conversations with. Send me an email. Audio clips are welcome. inallairness@gmail.com. Time to share another great review from a fan of the show. Thanks to Ben Arndt via Apple Podcasts Australia. It's titled Excellent Podcast, and it has a 5-star rating. Thank you very much, Ben. And it reads, In All Airness is a great listen, particularly for those who immerse themselves in the 80s and 90s NBA era. It is apparent that host Adam prepares immaculately for every interview. This leads to free-flowing conversations with guests. The podcast has improved gradually in quality from episode 1 until now, and I look forward to continuing to follow the pod's success in the future. Adam, well done, and thank you for this unreal content. Ben, that's high praise. Thanks very much, mate. Really appreciate you taking the time out to add such a great review of the podcast. Thanks a lot. Worldwide, the show has 167 ratings on Apple Podcasts, with an average of 4.5 stars, with 90 reviews across all providers. Thanks for your continued support. If you add a review, I'd love to read it out on a future episode. Your ratings and reviews are one of the best ways to support the podcast. If you enjoy the show, please do tell your basketball-loving friends about it. Your word-of-mouth recommendations are certainly worth their weight in gold. You can stay up to date with my podcast and subscribe to my monthly email newsletter. You'll receive exclusive details on upcoming podcast episodes, future high-profile guests to appear on the show, and more. Simply email me inallairness@gmail.com. You can subscribe to my show in various ways. Search for In All Airness, 3 words, on your podcast app of choice. The show is on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Overcast, Android, and more. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show, and share my web address with your friends and colleagues, inallairness.com. Check out the podcast archive for plenty more episodes with high-profile guests. Follow me on Twitter @inallairness. Please add your like to the show's social hub, facebook.com/inallairness. Join me next time for another edition of the show.